Okay, that's good enough.
We're good enough, Danny.
We're good enough.
Everyone, welcome back.
I winked at him. I just threw him off. Yeah.
I missed it.
You'll get on camera.
Hey, everyone, welcome back to the Rick and Danny Show. We are here in studio in the, do we have a official?
Podloft, obviously, yeah.
Oh, so that's the official name.
Yeah.
Until we come up with something better.
We haven't come up with something better.
But I thought we were going to let the listeners decide.
Oh, that's a good point.
Because you've proven now multiple times that we have listeners.
All right, thank you for acknowledging.
Have we had any emails come in
No.
with name ideas?
That's embarrassing.
No. Well, we renamed it, so that is null and void. That name
Yeah,
idea.
okay. All right. But they still know our Twitter handle.
They can still come up with something, yeah.
Danny, you got a smile on your face.
I do have a joke. I told Brenna that I have been memorizing my jokes lately, so I'm going to throw one just off the cuff here.
If you memorized it, then it can't be off the cuff.
Well, it's going to seem off the cuff.
Oh.
But
I'm not cutting any of this out. This is all going to be...
No, it's perfect.
Okay, all right.
Okay, ad-lib for me, Danny.
All right. Got to be perfect for Rick here. Rick, do you know where I store my dad jokes?
I have an answer, but I don't think I'm allowed to say it on the podcast.
In my database.
It's not bad. It's pretty good.
That was solid.
Thank you.
That was a good one.
Solid. It's a good B+.
I do have two today, but I'm going to save the one for
Good
later.
idea.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
So I think one of the things that happened recently is ASCO, which is sort of the biggest oncology conference in the United States, held every year. Chicago. Danny, your old stomping grounds.
Old stomping grounds. I used to go when I was there every year, which was nice. It's about usually on the south side of the city, big conference center. People come from all over the world, for the conference. There's usually kind of late breaking abstracts, and at the end of the conference they announce the big trial data, stuff that's like groundbreaking, going to change practice, the way we treat our patients. So
I think they call it the plenary session.
Plenary.
Makes you feel all fancy.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
No, it's crazy. I mean, I went a couple years, and I couldn't get over the size and scope of it. It's like several hundred seat auditoriums filled at once, all giving different talks. And like you said, for the plenaries, it's thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of crazy. But, it's kind of where usually, at least each year, there's at least a handful of studies that get talked about or initial results talked about that potentially could be practice changing. Obviously we should wait and see till full papers come out before we make practice changes. But was there anything this year that caught your eye? I mean, I know of a few that got a lot of national non-medical media attention, but can you touch on, I think, the one that... Yeah,
the med-onc side of things. So one of the trials that got reported, and it was you almost never see this, it was a small trial for rectal cancer. So patients with localized rectal cancer, I think they included just stage 2 and stage 3 disease. So that's either a rectal cancer that's growing just, within the wall of the rectum, or possibly involving lymph nodes near the rectum. And the standard of care for the way we treat these patients normally is doing chemo and radiation, and then now sometimes we're even giving chemotherapy prior to chemo and radiation treatment, and then that's followed by surgery to remove any residual cancer. So the trial that got reported was a subset of patients with stage 2 and stage 3 rectal cancer, and they only included 16 patients in the trial. And it was, I think only 12 patients got on the study, and it was using a new PD-1 inhibitor, which is an immunotherapy drug given IV, something that's not FDA approved for rectal cancer. And I think it might have an FDA approval for endometrial cancer. I'm not 100% sure on that, but we don't use it for any other cancer type. So it's a new drug that really doesn't have a lot of indications. But another drug like it, Keytruda and Opdivo, are drugs that target the same protein. And what they did was they took these patients and they screen them for a condition called microsatellite instability, or another way of saying it is mismatch repair protein deficiency.
So not Elon Musk satellite?
No,
different
not
kind. Different kind. Okay, got it. Remember, you got to talk to me. I'm slow.
We're gonna stay on track here. Rick.
Okay, sorry.
So these are patients with specific genetic mutations in the tumor cells that lead to really more mutations and instability of the DNA, and usually leads to a better response to immunotherapy. We actually use this condition called microsatellite instability in patients with metastatic disease, and treat them with immunotherapy. For patients with metastasized rectal and colon cancers, you can use immunotherapy. But this is kind of a novel approach to use immunotherapy for patients with this genetic change in an earlier stage of the disease before it metastasizes. So they enrolled 16 patients, 12 of them got treated. 6 months of IV immunotherapy before any radiation was given, before any surgery was done. And the unbelievable result was that all 12 of those patients had a complete response, meaning you couldn't see any residual cancer left over. And I think they did exams, so they did an endoscopic exam to make sure that there was no tumor left over, and did some random biopsies and imaging.
I couldn't find the information on the random. They did do random biopsies.
I'm not 100% sure, but it got published in the New England Journal, and there were kind of pictures of their endoscopy images. Yeah. I assume that they did. I would think. Yeah. Hope that
usually the GI docs will tattoo it, or the surgeon will tattoo it, and
right.
If it regresses, you still can biopsy the area.
So I think the way they performed the study from there was anyone in complete remission, where you didn't have any residual cancer, could be just under surveillance, and I don't think any of those patients underwent radiation yet or surgery yet, but they're still doing follow-up. So we don't know. For the patients that may be only 6 to 12 months out from their treatment, if they're going to stay in complete remission. But I think, we don't anticipate a patient who has metastatic colon cancer or rectal cancer who's treated with immunotherapy. We don't expect them to have a 100% response rate. We expect maybe about a 40% response rate. So it's really unbelievable to see that. I think if it holds true for more patients, that would be an awesome change of practice in terms of, less toxic treatment, the need to no need to undergo a surgery, which can really affect quality of life for the future, sometimes requiring ostomy bags and, major changes in bowel function. So, what did you think, Rick, when you heard that?
I think it's pretty exciting, and I hope it can be extrapolated to a larger, patient population in terms of a trial that actually get more numbers. Certainly I don't think anyone's going to be making, hopefully not, practice-changing decisions based off, 12 patients. But It certainly is extremely, extremely promising, because it is, if it turns out to be true and in long-term follow-up, the results hold.
Yeah.
The word gets thrown around a lot, but this really would be a game changer.
For sure.
Because you're sparing patients significant procedures and operations and toxicity, and then you've cured them of their rectal cancer. So it's it's definitely, I think it was the most exciting thing. And I think, can you help the listeners understand, you mentioned it's a specific subset of rectal cancer patients. Is this the majority, the minority? What, if you're looking at rectal cancer as a whole, what population overall is it?
It's a minority. I haven't looked at the most recent statistics for having microsatellite instability. So that is analogous, or it can be associated with a condition called Lynch syndrome, which is more of an inherited condition where you have instability of the DNA, and basically you're not able to repair DNA when it gets damaged very well. So there's mechanisms to fix DNA when there's DNA damage, and these patients don't have the repair proteins there that are responsible for helping repair the DNA, and so they're more prone to certain types of cancer, including colon cancer. And this can happen sporadically in a cancer, and in rectal and colon cancer it tends to happen, but it is in a minority of patients. I think it's roughly 10-15% of cases. It might even be a little bit less than that, but certainly, for as many patients as we screen, we actually, any new patient with a diagnosis of rectal or colon cancer gets screened for this. The pathologists usually do the staining. You just do the staining on the tumor cells, and but it is a minority. So when you hear that, oh, this is immunotherapy that's curing patients without the need for surgery and radiation, it is only a subset of those patients who are eligible for the treatment. Because what we know in the metastatic setting, when patients have metastatic disease, is that if you give this treatment to someone who does not have those genetic changes, it doesn't work. It literally does not work.
Right.
So,
Right. And I mean, I think this is even more pronounced, but even to some extent with what we've talked about on previous episodes, where you're looking at different lung cancers and other tumors where you stain for what's the percentage of positivity of some of these markers, and that can sometimes be a cutoff to understand, okay, who's really going to benefit from immunotherapy, who
Right.
needs immunotherapy plus something else,
right.
or who do we think probably won't benefit from immunotherapy. So I think it's important, if you're a patient, obviously ask your doctor these things, but also
Right.
understand that not every treatment necessarily would be the best thing for your cancer, even if it's in the same location and the same type of cancer.
Right, right. And I mean, it is, this is kind of precision medicine at its best in terms of identifying a genetic marker, which is, a mutation that you can target potentially. And this isn't a drug that targets that mutation, but we know that patients with this genetic change have a better response. And for example, lung cancer, there's been trials to look at early stage lung cancer and giving the same type of immunotherapy to patients, and we see nowhere near that kind of a response rate. I mean, I think trial came out with stage 2, I think maybe stage 3A disease, where they gave them pre-operative immunotherapy, and the complete response rates were in the 20% range, and so they didn't really select for patients with this mutation or anything like that, but you just look at the difference between the response rates. It's striking. So, science can be frustrating because it's such a slow process to figuring out what's the best treatment for patients. But I mean, this, if it holds true for a bigger set of patients, is going to be just, game changer, like you said. So how about you, Rick? What about the radiation oncology side of things?
Yeah,
Anything new and exciting?
There wasn't a whole lot radiation-specific trials at ASCO. Obviously, ASCO is usually a med-onc-dominated conference, but I'll selfishly talk about what I thought was an interesting trial with the lutetium-177 PSMA. So this trial was looking at patients who have progressed after initial therapy, metastatic prostate cancer patients, and they randomized them, those whose tumors were PSMA positive. So not quite the same as what you were just talking about in terms of selecting out based on pathology.
Right.
But this one, they're actually doing a special scan where they scan to see, does the patient's prostate cancer light up with the PSMA marker? And so we know that those, prostate cancer cells express that protein. And so in those patients, they said, well, should we give them chemo or should we give them the lutetium PSMA?
Right.
And so what they found was that the survival of the patients was the same at about 1.5 to 2 years. So one drug didn't increase the life expectancy versus the other. But with the PSMA, the quality of life and the side effect rates were dramatically lower than than additional second-line chemotherapy. So it's one of those things where this may be one where, and I always say it, I sound like a broken record, if you're not improving length of life or quality of life, what are we doing? So this might be one where you may not be improving length of life, but we're improving quality of life. And so that's in inappropriately selected patients. So, I think it's the big picture way I look at it is it's kind of the slow march of how early in the treatment process can these, radioligand molecules move. Obviously here we have Shameless plug alert. Here we have a trial open for
Yeah.
newly diagnosed metastatic
Right.
prostate cancer where they're
Right.
trying to move it in the front line setting. We know it works in the last line setting.
Right.
Now this trial at ASCO kind of says, well, maybe it works in the not quite the last line, but a little bit ahead of that.
Right.
So, I think it's going to be interesting to see how far it can move before we're doing too much early.
Do you think the degree of PSMA expression matters?
I think it's not the degree that matters. I think it's my gut tells me it's more of a binary.
Okay.
Either
it does or it doesn't.
Yeah, right. And so the other thing that this trial did was they mandated that there could be no non-PSMA positive lesions.
Mm-hmm.
So meaning,
Oh, I gotcha.
so they did a regular PET
Yeah.
and a PSMA PET.
Yeah.
And so if you had discordant findings, those
Yeah.
patients weren't eligible.
Yeah.
So that eliminates, depending on the study you read, anywhere from 5 to 15% of metastatic prostate cancer patients.
Got it.
But the vast majority will be predominantly PSMA expressing.
Yeah.
But no, it's like precision, not on the pathological side, but more on the radiographic
Mm-hmm.
side.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where, when you look at theranostics as a big umbrella of treatment, I think that's where it's going to go is,
Yeah.
making sure you appropriately select patients based on tumor type, but also based on what are their actual
Mhm.
scan findings showing.
Definitely. Yeah, that PSMA trial we have for the upfront, patients, and I think so far it's off and running. It's doing well. We have some patients on it, and
Everyone's
we're
got patients on it.
excited to see the results of it once we get more people on it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out, but I definitely am cautiously optimistic.
Right. But I notice, the patients we have on it, because we have the option now, we can put patients on just, androgen blockade, or we can put them on chemo to start with, or we have this trial option, which is the PSMA lutetium treatment with androgen blockade. And I think patients are tolerating it quite well. Like, so you're saying in the, what is that? Was the
So
second or third line?
after docetaxel
Yeah.
failure, but before cabazitaxel.
Cabazitaxel, yeah. So, patients are tolerating it no matter the line of therapy, I think. It's a good option for patients. And available. I think we're still enrolling.
Yeah, we are enrolling. Last I checked, when we first started, we were like the second site in the country or third. Now I'm sure there's more, but I think we're still the only ones in this general region.
Yeah.
So, it's exciting.
Might be the only site with doctors who are part of a podcast. I don't know. Maybe.
Probably.
Hypothetically.
Maybe.
Probably, to be honest with you.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to another episode of The Rick and Danny Show. We appreciate your attention and listening to us.
Thanks, guys, for joining us. Yeah, I know. I saw your face and I said, yeah.
We appreciate your attention.
No, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we appreciate your attention.
Oh, did you say that?
That's
Yeah.
what I said.
Okay.
Like they actually listened. That's
Oh,
fine.
yeah.
I can change it.
Okay.
Doesn't matter to me.
All right, I'll do the
Sure,
social,
why not?
social media. All right.
Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of The Rick and Danny Show. We hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys. And you can always check us out on social media. Follow us on Twitter, Rick and Danny Show. Actually, it's Rick Danny Show. I'm sorry, unless Brenna changed this.
I didn't change it.
So it's Rick Danny Show on Twitter.
We're probably going to lose the Twitter
probably gonna
handle.
lose the Twitter,
Twitter's going to be
but-
migrating to the @_CSNF.
I'll just
handle.
cut. I'll
Yes.
just cut it in when I do it. It's fine.
And Facebook and Instagram, it is Rick and Danny Show. And email us at rickanddannyshow@gmail.com. Rick, we'll see you next time.
Sounds good, man.